Today I'm drawing Super Saiyan Gogeta from Dragon Ball. Gogeta is one of my is a very good Dragon Ball character uh, to draw because of their powerful design and fusion look. Um, I think it's fun to draw as well. I'm starting with overall body structure and pose. Um, at this stage, I'm focusing on proportions rather than details, aka the structure first, and obviously aiming to make sure everything's in the right place. Um, all the way back from the skeleton, aka the stick figure with the ball joints, the overall idea of what the musculature would be, kind of shape wise, over that skeleton, and then starting to draw the details over that. But I usually start with the air, obviously, right? Um, and then after I get the actual body parts, or at least parts of the body part, or maybe an entire limb or something like that, then start adding in more details. I might add in details before I even finish an entire body part to help me gauge the proportions of how, like, if I'm drawing a finger and a hand, I might draw the fingernail and some of the creases in the finger to understand how far I've went down the finger until I draw the next finger or parts of the knuckles or the palm of the hand. Um, or with the arm, does he have certain musculature in his arm in between each joint? So in between the wrists and the elbows, there musculature? Is there shading? I might do some of that musculature so I can help gauge the distance between where shading and where musculature is between, for example, like the wrist and the elbow. Or same with clothing folds from the shoulder to maybe the shoulder joint. There could be clothing folds and a jacket or a shirt or whatever a person's wearing. So some of those folds are details I'll add in instantly as I'm drawing. As I get the idea of the shoulder, for example, I might do some of the folds so I could understand where I need to place, like where the armpit goes, and then where, as I go down towards like the further down the arm or into the chest. Right. So using details to help me bridge the gap would be why I would do some details earlier on. But obviously, every single other detail I wanted to add in will come in later on after I've already built out everything main structure wise. Then details that, help create, round off all the appearance of everything that you drew in general. Um, or if another way to say it, if there was no shading, like if there was no lighting, how would this person appear? And then like it'd be pitch black, but imagine you could see them. But then if you added lighting, and you added, so you can now see how they look, um where's the shading landing everywhere and where's the musculature appearing everywhere, and any texture and any details, now that's all visible. So the details would be in, that's what I explained latter. But prior to that, that's, the idea, not that you could see someone in pitch black, but the idea of like, how would they look without all that? You could use some of that to bridge the gap between different areas of the drawing. And then later on, you add everything else. Um, at this stage, I'm focusing on proportions rather than details. I did say that. Now I'm building the facial structure. The eyes and expression are important because they help sell the confidence and strength of the character. Next comes the Super Saiyan hair, which is one of the most recognizable parts of Gogeta's design. Now I'm working on the shoulders, chest, and arms. I'm trying to create volume and keeping the muscles readable. Next, I add the fusion vest belt, pants, clothing folds to help create movement and depth. Or his dynamic stance or dynamic choice of appearance based on the reference I'm choosing to draw him in, right? Clothing folds create movement and depth. Also, it, kind of self-explanatory, but yeah, like based on the way his body is positioned underneath his clothes can cause the clothes to relax on the body a specific way. Um, so the folds would be drawn in relation to how the specific clothing he's wearing is resting on him, and then obviously shading within those folds can help, or how dark the lines is, which meant that something's a deeper fold could so the darker lines um showcasing deeper folds, where lighter lines would be less folds or maybe smaller detail and texture in those fold areas. um and combined with the shading of it, or the shading of where the lighting was hitting them, to where once that shading um the shading example gets to where the folds are, all that helps create the quote unquote depth look alongside the proportions of where everything needs to be. So like, like, is there a fold in, like, for example, his shoulder area because his arm is pointing forward, causing like folds to be in like the armpit shoulder area, um which is going to be a bit further back, and that's going to be a smaller area compared to his hand that's pointing forward. So the proportions as well creates a depth, but like how the lighting or the folds will be and even appear, and how big they are, literally all these things help create, quote unquote depth in a, it's obvious it's a 2D drawing, but like there's still depth, and there's ways to create it. Not that you even have to go stand in front of your mirror and point forward while wearing a similar type of clothing as your character and see what happens. And you could literally draw or take the idea of what you see when you look in the mirror, like, oh yeah, but how are you doing that on paper? Or how are you intentionally trying to portray that, right? Kind of just summarizing some things I just said before I go into the final parts of talking about this. Um, uh, with the chest and arms, I might have oversized the hands a little bit. Maybe people don't notice that, maybe they do, and I could have also maybe did a better job structuring the legs in the pants. He does have baggy pants. Um, as you can see, the fashion attire in Dragon Ball Z, I heard someone talking about where it could have came from, but I don't know what the author's specific reference point was. So, for example, right off the bat, there's people wearing martial arts gis that have their own fashion to them. Like, I don't think most gis come with, like, people have boots that match the gi or whatever. Like how Goku has dark blue boots that match his, like, dark blue belt and his dark blue undershirt under his orange overall gi. Um, it's kind of like what it kind of reminds me of, because, and it's just kind of funny if you look at, like, quote unquote Shaolin monks, they wear like orange gis. So like in this show, all the Z fighters or the highest level martial artists on Earth who are defending the planet, they all will wear orange gis, which is kind of funny. So um it's like the reference point was obviously something from martial arts culture in general, and the way they train and all that stuff kind of reflects it. They even have Krillin or Tien who have like the even bald head or whatever. So obviously there is reference taken from that. Um, and obviously a lot of that came before even martial arts training where there's gis. And then there's also I've seen a video. I've seen I think a few other videos discussing it, and I'm trying to piece together some of the main ideas. So some people said that they, for example, the like for example, Boo and Piccolo and then Namekians and all that stuff. So their fashion sense, I guess, was supposedly taken from either, if you want to call it Arab, or if you want to call it Moorish or whatever, and which is those cultures had some type of similarity, but the whole thing about like Arabians wearing like big cloaks and like big wearing a turban on their head and wearing like baggy pants and like the the pointy shoes you see in like characters like Aladdin, like people who would be in like desert areas but be wearing like bulky clothing. I heard supposedly he got supposedly there was references taken from that or whatever. And then people who would talk all about conspiracy and how that appeared in all these cartoons and all that stuff, like regardless of what reason it appeared or if people even know why, because people could see references to things that would be in the occult or conspiracy realm and assume it's for any reason or assume it's for a bad reason. That's actually not what it means, because like nobody actually ever, I don't think anybody actually ever found out why stuff like that was in the show. It's kind of funny. I just saw a meme recently that showed someone was talking about how in the show there's a reference to, they call the strongest martial artist on earth or whatever, quote unquote, his name is Hercules, but his name is Mr. Satan or whatever. And they were showing that, like, for example, when you're watching Dragon Ball Z, when they would have a commercial saying, "Oh, we'll be right back," it would show, like, for example, Gohan and Videl sitting in a car, or I think it was Goten would pick up the car and turn the car around, and it would say 666 on it or something like that. So it's just like, the thing is, I'm pretty sure the people who put that stuff in the show, they knew what they were doing, and I think some of the fashion sense was even more than Arabian. It was probably Moorish, because the quote unquote occult and what it says about the Moors or whatever, without getting too deep into that, they were heavily associated with numerology and finding the real meaning of numbers like that, and using all that, any type of symbolism or any type of stuff that would be considered bad, they didn't see that as a bad thing, and then they would use that to, they'd use stuff like that to gain power or whatever. And some of those people were of the same, we're in the same type of business as the people who, for example, run the world today, right? So supposedly that fashion sense was taken from them, because that's supposedly how they used to dress. They used to wear turbans and they used to wear like baggy pants or whatever. Now, what's funny is, like, in this show, they'll take some of the most powered up forms of people in the show. So like when Goku and Vegeta fused together, or when Boo came and Boo was like pretty much unbeatable, and they had to go to measures that um literally the series was ended with them fighting different forms of Boo, and they had to go to measures that they weren't even supposed to be able to go to be able to win that fight, right? But they have the most powerful people dressed up in that fashion. They're dressed up as the people who used to quote unquote run the world, right? So I think that's funny that there's like kind of that ironic thing about the fashion. And I kind of forgot why I brought that up, but I guess I was just discussing the fashion in the show. Now the thing is, because the pants are baggy, and there's definitely a lot of wrinkles and creases in it, it makes it easier to create depth, because like you're literally doing lines for all the creases, and if you're actually shading it, there's literally shading with a lot of those clothes. So if anything, one thing I could say is like in Dragon Ball, there's actually the characters look very simple, but if you want to get a lot of practice with like proportions and shading and clothing, or I should say clothing fulls, to the point where it gives you an opportunity to practice like depth with shading and full clothing fulls alone, like drawing people in their fusion forms or drawing Boo or Piccolo. Those are good opportunities to be able to practice that because their clothing perfectly forces you to actually have to practice that in order to get it correct, get it, the photo looking correct. Um, Overall, this was one of my stronger Dragon Ball sketches. I think the anatomy and overall proportions came out well. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next drawing video.